Perfect. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our WECafe, how to protect your business from cyber threats. My name is Carrie Lee Auger. I am the Director of Programs and Partnerships here at Women's Enterprise Center. I join you today from the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan peoples, and I invite you to write in the chat on whose traditional territories you are joining us from, if you would like to share that with everyone. I'm based at our head office here in Kelowna, and my role here is to oversee our training, education, and mentoring programs, which includes sessions like this one today. I'm also an entrepreneur with 2 businesses currently operating, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today on this very important topic. So our goal is always to provide content you need to start, build, grow your business. If there's a topic that you would like us to consider for a future webinar, if you have information you can share yourself, please be sure to complete our follow-up survey and share your ideas or recommended speakers as well. And I do want to thank my colleague Netta, who's here in the session with us today, and she is managing sharing of links and information in the chat. So I want to make sure everybody can see there. There is a great resource for finding your traditional territories if you don't know that as well and would like to share that. So I welcome you to share that information. So again, I think a lot of us are getting Zoom fatigue more than Zoom unfamiliarity, but just wanted to remind everyone that we will be using the Q&A and the chat features. And if subtitles would be helpful for you, you can also turn that feature on as well. Briefly, for those of you joining us maybe for the first time or new to Women's Enterprise Center, we are a nonprofit organization devoted to helping BC women start, lead, and grow their own business. We have a full range of services, including business loans of up to $150,000. We have business advisory team, skills training like this session, mentoring programs. We have a one-to-one mentoring program, peer groups, and taking the stage leadership training. We have a ton of resources available on our website or through our client services team, and a really supportive community to help you realize your business potential. And we do this even though everybody's working remotely right now from 3 offices in Kelowna, Vancouver, and Victoria. And our passion is really to empower entrepreneurs to your business success. And we're funded by the federal government through Western Economic Diversification as part of the Women's Enterprise Initiative, which some of you may have seen. We have similar organizations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So again, more about our services, if any of these pique your interest, you can learn more at wec.ca, and also be sure to sign up for our e-blasts and e-news to get timely and current information. I think we have an e-news going out today, so it's the perfect time to sign up. And then quickly, we do still have some of the government programs coming out. We do have the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund still available. That's been extended, so applications are accepted until June 30th, but funding is limited. So once we reach the money that we've been allocated, we can't disperse anymore. So if you're questioning this at all, whether you are eligible or if it's right for you and your business, I encourage you to reach out to our team to find out and get that application in before June 30th. And then again, as we, in BC here, we had a great announcement, right? Starting that reopening plan is great, but we still have our COVID-19 page up, because as those plans get announced, as programs get extended, as new things pop up, we try to keep this COVID-19 page as current and refreshed as possible. So you know all the programs and supports that are available to you, especially as we now go into reopening and recovery mode. So again, that's somewhere that you could bookmark to kind of check that once a week and see what's happening. So enough about WEC and the programs and what we do. Let's get into why we're all here today. And Lisa, I'm going to do a quick intro, and then we'll do a swap of the screen share here as well. So we have Lisa and Cassie joining us. So I've got some brief photos here. I'm going to stop my screen share and just give me 1 second here. So we're relying more and more on technology, as we know, especially in the past year and a half. And we really need to make sure that we've got strong controls in place, right? Strengthening that cybersecurity is more so important. So a cyber attack can impact businesses of any size, leave them vulnerable to financial issues, reputational damage. So CyberSecure Canada helps small and medium organizations protect themselves from cyber threats by introducing us to 13 baseline controls designed to be straightforward to implement, yet very effective. So again, thinking about all our email, our website, the social that we're using, it's important for us to all understand this. And then this voluntary program is a collaboration by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, ISED, and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity and the Standards Council of Canada. So if you as your organization, your business implement these 13 controls, you can receive a government-backed certification that shows your customers, your clients, potential investors, partners, that their data is protected. So today we're thankful to be hosting Lisa Monoslai, Economic Advisor at Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada, ISED, and Cassie Brubaker, who's a systems analyst for the Ontario School Board's Insurance Exchange, to show us how we can improve our business resiliency and competitive advantage by becoming CyberSecure certified. So Lisa is an economic advisor for ISED, leading the outreach activities here in BC and the Yukon for CyberSecure Canada. She works closely with private, public, and nonprofit sectors and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity to raise awareness of safeguards organizations can put in place to build their cybersecurity posture. She also acts as an advisor to federal government executives on several industries in the Pacific region, including skills training, post-secondary education, and tourism. Experienced in programs that support economic development, Lisa is passionate about helping businesses grow and improve their operational resilience. Prior to joining ISED, Lisa was at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, where she worked on implementing funding for startups and SMEs through Futurepreneur, MyTax, and the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program, or IRAP. You may have heard of that. So I think Lisa knows a lot about the cybersecurity, but also about small business and what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. And Cassie Brubaker has been employed by the Ontario School Board as a systems analyst for 5 years. She's a resource for various IT needs, including development and maintenance of custom software program, which supports one of core operations, staff support for purchased IT, managed IT vendors, plus anything else tech related. Cassie led the cybersecurity certificate project in 2020, which was a great learning experience for her and the organization. She has a criminology degree from Wilfrid Laurier University and a business analyst diploma from Conestoga College. In her spare time, you can find her playing basketball, hockey, or spike ball. I love this. So Cassie, I'm also looking forward to hearing from you because you've actually gone through this process and put these tools in place. So hearing about your experiences is going to be very, very valuable. So again, thank you to Lisa and Cassie. And Lisa, I will hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that great introduction. And also thank you to the Women's Enterprise Center for helping us raise awareness of key issues in cybersecurity and in the Government of Canada's cybersecurity certification program for small and medium organizations called CyberSecure Canada. So I'm going to kick off this webinar by running through our agenda for today. Before we start talking about CyberSecure Canada, it's important that we talk about why the program is needed. So we'll begin by looking at the current cybersecurity posture of small and medium organizations, which I'll be referring to as SMOs, by the way, and also why cybersecurity is becoming an increasingly challenging problem to address. Then I'll give you a quick overview of what CyberSecure Canada is and how it solves some of those main issues that we're seeing when it comes to protecting SMOs from cyber attacks. Finally, I'll go through those 13 baseline cybersecurity controls, which are the foundation of CyberSecure. I'll also walk us through how the CyberSecure certification process works and what some of the benefits of certification are. And lastly, we'll hear from Cassie Brubacher, who's a systems analyst at the Ontario School Board Insurance Exchange, as Carolee had mentioned, and she'll be able to give us some insight into what it is actually like to go through the CyberSecure Canada process. And if you do have any questions, we do have that Q&A chat box, so feel free to ask there. I'll be able to answer any of those questions at the end of the presentation, along with Cassie. All right, so let's begin. So I had mentioned that in order to talk about CyberSecure Canada, we need to talk about why the program exists. And the main reason it was created is because cyber attacks don't only happen to big companies. They happen to small and medium organizations every day. So I wanted to take a poll of the audience to see what you all think the frequency of cyber attacks are for small and medium businesses in Canada. So the poll is up right now, and I'll read it out to you as you consider what your answer might be. According to Statistics Canada data, how many Canadian small and medium businesses do you think reported a cybersecurity incident in 2019? 15% of medium, 12% of small, 40% of medium, 32% of small, or 29% of medium and 18% of small. I'll give some time for the voting. All right, so it looks like 50% of you picked 40% of medium and 32% of small. The answer is actually a bit less than that, but still quite significant. It's 29% of medium businesses and 18% of small businesses experienced a cyber attack in Canada in 2019. So in other words, 1/3 of medium and 1/5 of small businesses went through some sort of cyber incident. And this is before the pandemic had forced many of us to work remotely and quickly adopt new technologies. So we know that cybersecurity was a big issue in 2019 for SMOs, and it's become an even bigger challenge as many of us continue to work from home. So going back to the slide that's on the screen right now, why is improving the cybersecurity of SMOs especially important for the Canadian economy? Well, it's because SMOs make up 98% of organizations in Canada, and they employ nearly half of Canada's 16 million workers. So if business resiliency of SMOs are strong, it helps create and maintain good job opportunities, and it helps grow the Canadian economy. What's more is that hackers are increasingly targeting SMOs and becoming more sophisticated, with 78% of Canadian organizations who are victims of cyber attacks saying that those attacks are increasing in sophistication. Why are these cyber attacks happening to so many SMOs? Well, there's a few reasons, 3 that I'm going to identify. And the first is that the information hackers want is often less guarded on a small organization system. And these pieces of information can include credit card credentials, intellectual property, and personally identifiable information. And this personal data is very valuable to hackers. Personal information is being sold on the dark web for as little as $5 for a credit card number, $30 for an entire identity, or up to $1,000 for medical records. The second reason SMOs are being targeted is that when smaller organizations partner with larger ones, they can often provide back channel access to a hacker's true target. So for example, in 2014, there was a cyber attack on Target, the retail store. But to get to this company, criminals had compromised a third party's vendor's HVAC system to obtain access to millions of credit card numbers from Target customers. So an SMO's partnership with larger companies can sometimes put them at risk of cyber threats too. Oops. I see. Third reason, there we go. And the third reason that SMOs are targeted is due to a lack of resources. Small organizations are just less equipped to handle an attack. SMOs tend to invest less in cybersecurity, with 33% of them spending $0 on the issue. And 56% of SMOs do not have employees responsible for cybersecurity because it may be too costly for their organization to implement. And therefore, it's not deemed as a high enough risk. While many SMOs are already experiencing cyber incidents for the reasons that I just described, we're also seeing those cyber attacks increase in frequency and sophistication, as I had mentioned. In the past 12 months, 82% of Canadian organizations reported an increase in overall attack volume. Hackers are continuing to target SMEs, with 71% of cyber attacks targeting organizations with less than 100 employees. And the cost of these attacks can be pretty detrimental to smaller organizations, as the average recovery cost from a cyber incident is around $50,000. And in addition to that financial loss, attacks can also leave businesses vulnerable to reputational damage, data breaches, and loss of intellectual property. All of that in combination often results in SMEs who are victims of attacks being forced to shut down. Now, we know that cyber incidents are growing and that cybersecurity is a hard problem to solve, especially for SMOs that have limited resources. And to address this issue, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, also known as ISED, launched CyberSecure Canada in 2018. And this program provides clear, easy to implement, and cost-effective steps for helping organizations that are both for-profit and nonprofit with less than 500 employees protect themselves from most cyber attacks. All right, now getting into what CyberSecure Canada is and the details around that program. The program is a voluntary cybersecurity certification program. And to get certified, organizations need to implement 13 baseline cybersecurity controls that have been published by the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. The Cyber Centre, as we call them, is part of the communication security establishment, and it's Canada's trusted source on cybersecurity. What's more is that CyberSecure Canada is working with the Standards Council of Canada to incorporate those 13 cybersecurity controls into a national standard that will help even more strongly ensure small and medium organizations have access to a reliable cybersecurity framework. And the program also supports Canada's national cybersecurity strategy, which was also announced in 2018. And it includes measures to mitigate cybercrime, foster innovation and economic growth, and develop Canadian cyber talent. There's several federal departments that are collaborating on delivering this initiative, ISED being one of them, Public Safety Canada being another, along with the Communication Security Establishment as well. So in short, CyberSecure Canada was designed to help SMOs improve their cybersecurity baseline, educate Canadians about cybersecurity, and increase consumer confidence in the digital economy. And it does this by providing cost-effective certification in cybersecurity that's easy to implement for non-technical specialists. So moving on to the certification process and the details of how that really works. The thing an SMO needs to do to get certified, as mentioned, is implement those 13 cybersecurity controls. And I'll go over those controls in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. Once an organization puts those controls in place, then they can submit a request to get audited by a certification body. And a certification body is an organization separate from government that's been accredited by the Standards Council of Canada to administer these cybersecure audits. These are companies that specialize in IT and cybersecurity and have met some really high cybersecurity standards and some cybersecurity knowledge. Once that certification body completes its audit of the organization, it then determines whether those 13 controls were implemented effectively, and if so, it issues an official CyberSecure Canada certification that's valid for 2 years and comes in the form of a certification mark that a company can put on its website. And I'll note that the reason the certification lasts for 2 years is that technologies are constantly evolving and hackers are coming up with a lot of different ways to execute cyber attacks. So cybersecurity is something that we do have to keep building, and it's not something that we can just implement in one go. All right, now I'm going to elaborate on those 13 controls that I keep referring to. I'll walk you through them while providing a bit of a high-level context, maybe just 1 to 2 sentences that give a little bit of an overview. If you do want more information on these controls and some detail on exactly what you need to do to implement them to achieve certification, there is a publication available on the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity's website, and it gives you a lot of the details that you need. So, controls. The first one is to develop an incident response plan. This is a plan for how you respond to cybersecurity incidents. And if you have a plan, you can quickly respond to these incidents, restore critical systems and data, and keep service interruptions and data loss to a minimum. The second control is to patch operating systems and applications. When software issues or vulnerabilities are identified, vendors release patches to fix bugs, address known vulnerabilities, and improve usability or performance. So you can enable these automatic patches to solve issues quite quickly. Use strong user authentication. Number 3, implement user authentication policies that balance both security and usability. Ensure your devices authenticate users before they can actually gain access to your systems. Number 4, back up and encrypt your data. Make sure to copy your information and critical applications to 1 or more secure locations, such as the cloud. If a cyber incident or a natural disaster happens, then these copies can help you continue your business activities and prevent data loss. 5, configure devices securely. Take the time to review your device's default settings and make modifications as required. At a minimum, it's recommended to change your default passwords, turn off location services, and disable any unnecessary features. 6, enable security software. Activate firewalls. Install antivirus software on your devices so that you can thwart those malicious attacks and protect against malware. 7, train your employees. You can tailor your training programs to address your organization's cybersecurity protocols. Having an educated workforce who has been taught about cybersecurity issues can really help reduce some of the risks around cyber threats. 8, secure mobile devices. Ensure your employees can use only approved applications and download those applications from trusted sources. 9, establish basic perimeter defenses. Defend your networks from cyber threats by, for example, using a firewall to defend against outside intrusions by monitoring incoming and outgoing traffic and filtering out some malicious sources. 10, secure cloud and outsourced services. Get to know your service provider before you contract them, and make sure that that service provider has measures in place to meet your security requirements and your security needs. 11, secure websites. Encrypt your sensitive data. Ensure your certificates are up to date and use strong passwords at the back end of your website. 12, access control and authorization. Employees should really only have access to the information that they need to do their jobs. And each user should have their own set of login credentials as well. And lastly, number 13, secure portable media. Storing data using a portable device such as a USB key is very convenient, but they can be prone to loss or theft. So maintaining an inventory of all your portable assets, and if you can use encrypted storage devices, that would help reduce the likelihood of a cyber threat impacting your organization. So those are the 13 baseline cybersecurity controls recommended by the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity that form the foundation of the CyberSecure Canada program. And as I had mentioned, once those controls are in place, ISED can put you in touch with a certification body so you can get that audit started. And there are currently 4 certification bodies, which include Bulletproof Solutions, CyberSecurity Canada, WECafe, and SourceTech IT. They all offer audits, but they all also offer slightly different services, which helps make sure the needs of all SMOs are covered. So you have the ability to choose the certification body that is going to fit your needs as an organization as well. So something that I will need to point out is that there is a cost for certification. And the reason there's a cost to this is that it's expected your business will grow and significantly benefit from a CyberSecure Canada certification as more customers and clients and partners become interested in working with you because they know that their data is protected. The cost is for the audit only, and that cost is also set by the certification bodies, and it does vary based on the size and complexity of the organization. There is an approximate average cost that I can share with you. Audits typically cost organizations around $2,000 to $5,000, which is not too much when we compare it to the recovery cost that an organization might see from cyber attacks, which is about $50,000 $100,000. So it's certainly a good investment that can benefit your organization. I also wanted to highlight some of the benefits of receiving a CyberSecure Canada certification mark. The mark can do two main things for your business, in addition to, of course, protecting yourself from cyber attacks and making sure that you don't experience financial loss and other things that can come with it. The first thing is that it shows that your organization's been recognized by the Government of Canada as successfully putting key cyber safeguards in place. And second, a certification mark shows that your customers, or shows to your customers, clients, investors, and partners that their sensitive data is safe when working with or purchasing from you. And I had mentioned this earlier as being a pretty significant advantage of certification. So while there is a cost to the audit and certification, we also have a lot of free resources from ISED and the Cyber Center that help organizations learn about their cybersecurity gaps and how those 13 controls can help solve them. We have a free e-learning course that helps organizations identify cybersecurity threats as well as cybersecurity best practices. So that course is up and running, and it's on the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity website. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Organizations can also visit the Get Cyber Safe campaign website, which is an initiative launched by Public Safety Canada that highlights best practices in cybersecurity for individuals. But it would still help the individuals in your organization learn about some cybersecurity measures that they can take. And I had mentioned this earlier as well, the Cyber Center has a variety of free resources on cybersecurity, particularly a publication that details what needs to be done to implement those 13 baseline cybersecurity controls. Additionally, in the coming months, and what this slide right now is showing, we'll be putting out even more free e-learning materials that will provide some more in-depth outlines of each cybersecurity control. These materials will be free and publicly available. They'll be available in both official languages. They will also be less than 60 minutes, depending on the complexity of the content. They'll contain various levels of interactivity, which will help secure participants' understanding of these security controls. And lastly, they'll be vetted and developed with the guidance of a cybersecurity expert. So you know that the cybersecurity recommendations that you are receiving are sound and are strong. So, in summary, CyberSecure Canada is designed to help your organization increase its cybersecurity posture by introducing you to easy to implement and cost-effective cyber safeguards. And not only will it help protect your organization from attacks, but it will increase the trust your clients, customers, investors, and partners will have when working with you to know their information is protected. And yeah, that is the end of my part of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if we have time before passing it over to Cassie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's great. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Cassie as well. So I'm just going to remind everybody quickly to put any questions that you have in either the chat or the Q&A. I do see Netta is sharing links as you've been going through, Lisa. So we have the baseline document highlighted here, right? And just the awareness campaign as well. So I'm looking forward to learning more about the e-learning modules. But I'm excited to have Cassie come on as well and share some of your story of going through this process, because that might help answer some of the questions from participants today as well.
For sure. I will try to shove 7 months worth into about 10 minutes for you. So thanks first off for having me as a panelist on your webinar. I'm Cassie Brubaker. I'm a systems analyst with the Ontario School Board Insurance Exchange. We also go by OSBI, and I was a project leader on the CyberSecure certification project. A little bit about OSBI: we only have about 24 employees who make up our company, and we insure the school boards across Ontario. From an IT standpoint, we have about 3 resources internally that take care of the IT related items. But I'm sure, like many companies, we actually outsource our IT to a third-party organization that we kind of rely on their expertise to take care of all that for us. So we started our cybersecurity certification in January 2020, and we were certified by July of 2020. So it took us about 7.5 months to actually get there. So I'm just here today to sort of talk to you about OSBI's success and hopefully encourage you to be interested in wanting to get certified yourself, or at least get you start thinking about cybersecurity within your organization. So OSBI wanted to achieve our cyber certification because it was fairly new at the time, and we wanted to be a leader as it provided us an opportunity to sort of be cutting edge among smaller organizations, provide our organization a chance to improve our cybersecurity practices, ensure that our members, vendors, and staff all knew that we had cybersecurity as a top priority for our organization, just how we conduct daily operations, basically. As I previously mentioned, we outsourced to a third-party company for our IT support. So just bring that knowledge in-house for us was huge. Like I'm sure you heard in my bio, I come from a criminology background. That not necessarily cybersecurity wasn't my strength, I guess. So I've come a long way in the last year, but that was just nice to bring that knowledge in-house for us as well. Sort of our path to success, it came from the top down. So our CEO was really trying to push that we get started on it, see if we can achieve it. So, you know, we had the investment ready to go for it and the willingness to kind of keep that ongoing maintenance going forward. Once we decided internally that we wanted to pursue our certification, we sort of did our own gap analysis to start. So we're looking at, you know, where are we right now and where do we have to be in what we think we have to be ready for the audit. Once we sort of did that, we figured, you know what, let's explore the different certification bodies. We ended up going with CyberSecure Canada just because they are local to us, but also at the time they had one side that was the auditor and then the other side where they had a practitioner. So we used a practitioner. Right. Pretty heavily to help us, you know, here review my policies and procedures, help me figure out how do we get this done. So that was a huge part on why we were able to accomplish probably in the 7 months. I would say it would take a lot longer for us to have got there without a practitioner. And our goal was sort of try to get certified as on our first attempt of doing it, basically. The next part was to start putting together, you know, projects that we knew we'd have to do in order to become certified. So we had many projects within the larger project of things going on. So I guess if this is something that you're interested in doing, I would just say be prepared to set a budget aside to become like up to the standards, basically. That was, yeah, pretty much a big thing for us is we had probably about 10 little projects underneath this big one that we had to accomplish in order to meet the certification requirements. We also had to build all our policies and procedures. I'm sure we're not the only organization out there that doesn't quite have their policies and procedures in place and document it. So we documented all that. Now we use them going forward. We use them for training purposes, and they're reviewed annually as well. So out of the certification process, that sort of was one thing that we took away from it. And then The other thing that I can't stress enough is your relationship with your vendors, because your IT vendors and software vendors all play a part in your certification as well. For us, it was how do we communicate to them that we're not criticizing what you're doing. It's not that we don't trust what you're doing for us. It's no, let's just be on the same page with everything that we want to do. Ensure that we're clear about our cyber posture at the end of it. It was just making that very clear to them, and they definitely jumped on board. There's a strong relationship at the end of it. So it just kind of set that guideline too of, when we're going forward, this is a kind of standard that we're holding you against, and now you know what we're measuring in everything that we do. So that was probably one of the biggest things, working with our vendor and just not criticizing them on that side of things. And then the last part, when that was all said and done and we had everything sort of in place, we actually had to book our audit. So we took about a day to be audited by CyberSecure Canada. And we became the third company in Canada to become certified, I guess. And that was a huge achievement for us. I definitely took well-deserved 2-week holidays after that. Yeah, that was sort of our process within it. I just want to sort of talk about after the audit as well. And I think a lot of things that I'll touch point on here can be relevant to organizations, whether this is something that you are looking into or you're just wanting to make more of a cybersecurity awareness within your organization. So as I mentioned, the one thing that we know in IT is that it's always changing. There's always room for improvements that we can implement. So, whether you're certified or you're just going to look into this and get it started, is that that you're never done. You're never done. It's always an ongoing thing. You just can't sit back and say you're done implementing IT infrastructure somewhere and improvements, because there's always room to improve. So the one takeaway that we did is each year we sort of set aside 2 to 3 projects with our IT infrastructure that, hey, this is what we really want to work on. Want to work on our improvements. So one of those was actually moving our backup into the cloud. That was huge for us. I was just doing things like that. So just making sure that we're all on the same page with what we're setting out aside and setting up projects for that each year. And then the second part I would say is creating that buy-in process and embedding cybersecurity into your organization's culture. So I sort of do this from 2 sides of things. So the first side is with your vendors. So externally, so they sort of take on that certification interest themselves, or the interest in the certification process. So they took an interest in that. They continue to do so. As I mentioned, they know what we're measuring them up against now. I would say that your IT vendors probably play a much larger role today than they did 15 to 20 years ago. So all your data is now essentially in the cloud. Your organization, it's not just your office bubble that you're trying to protect. Your employees are now remote. So it's how do you keep that security while your employees work further and further away from your office. So I think that the biggest part was to get the buy-in process for them. We set high expectations for our vendors and just how they're managing our data, how they're storing it, transmitting it. We want to know pretty much everything that they're doing, just so we have an understanding too. The favorite line from our practitioner was, "Do you have the keys to your castle?" So that came up a lot. So yeah, that's always something to keep in mind. And then the other buy-in side comes from your staff internally. So we definitely made quite a few changes that our staff had to adjust in a short period of time. So not only were in the transition of work from home due to the pandemic, but now we were throwing changes at them from an IT policy and procedure standpoint. So as we sort of recognize that, hey, it's great we have these policies and procedures, but how do we have things like 2-factor authentication that impacts your end users, but now it's looking at how does this impact our staff? So sometimes you can throw too much change at them. And that can sort of cause that level of frustration from the end user. So, it's great. We've added security, but now we reduce the end user friendliness of a functionality. So we focused a lot on staff training, making cybersecurity awareness just a part of our company culture, as we recognize that our staff play a huge role in cybersecurity as well. Example, we talked the other day about phishing emails, right? So they're getting more and more sophisticated. Those are impacting your end users big time. We want to build the culture that, hey, if you click on the link, don't be afraid to come to IT, right? So have that openness of coming to IT, and I'd rather deal with it today than find out in 3 to 4 weeks that it led to something a little more serious. So it's just, yeah, I can't give enough kudos to our staff for just their taking on enjoying, we're just taking on the cybersecurity posture as well, and being a part of that it's not just your IT, it's your whole organization that kind of set foot in that. And then just the last part that I want to talk about is, we're looking to be leaders and part of a community that values and prioritizes cybersecurity. So I'm here today on behalf of OSBI to present, but I'm definitely interested in reaching out to other organizations that are watching this webinar today. I know when we first started hearing about the cybersecurity program, it would have been great to have a face of an organization that, hey, can I reach out to you? How did you get started on this? I'm interested in knowing more. So the more faces that we put to this as resources, myself and Lisa, I think it's great. And I'd be happy to connect with you if that's something that you're interested in. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I kind of had in my 10-minute wrap up of 7.5 months worth. So
it's like any project, right? Breaking it down into those bite-sized pieces as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully having, a few people involved in that process to kind of spread the work as well, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you both. I know we've got a couple of questions in here. And Lisa, you mentioned it, and then Cassie, you spoke about, you chose CyberSecure Canada. So in here, it's someone is asking, how does the CyberSecure Canada compare to other certifications and assessments through ISO or Nist? So can you elaborate on that, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. So there are other standards out there for cybersecurity, and Nist is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they have their own kind of certification process. ISO is the International Standards Organization, and they have a standard around cybersecurity as well. So often organizations that are quite large and require really high levels of cybersecurity protection will go and try to meet these standards and meet these certifications. The reason CyberSecure Canada is great is that it really is meant to fit the needs of smaller and medium organizations. So things like Nist and ISO might be out of reach financially and technically for much smaller businesses, but cybersecurity is still definitely something that's really important. So CyberSecure Canada is really built to be cost effective and provide a simplified framework and 13 steps and cybersecurity safeguards that are easier to implement, but still protect against most cyber attacks. And lastly, I'll just say that an organization that is CyberSecure Canada certified is on the right track or already has a leg up in moving toward those ISO or Nist certifications if they're interested in the future.
Okay, great. And that makes sense, right? A little bit smaller scale because there isn't as much risk potentially. And I wrote this down. I've seen it popped in here as well. How long does it usually take? Like Cassie, you mentioned about 7.5 months. Lisa, if you can elaborate, is there an average for some of those smaller, medium-sized businesses? Like should people estimate a year, 6 months? Like what's kind of the median that you've been seeing?
From talking to a lot of organizations about this program and speaking to organizations going through it, I have to say it really does depend. And that's because there are very, very different organizations have very different levels of cybersecurity going into it.
Right.
So one organization might have 6 out of the 13 controls already in place, and they just have already done that and don't have too far to go, whereas some organizations might be starting kind of from scratch. So it could be a years-long process. It could be done in a very short amount of time, depending on the types of resources that your business or organization does have. But what I will say, actually, because I do see another question in the chat about what to do if a company is not certified, and jumping off of my last answer, just starting with implementing some of the 13 controls is a good thing. If 13 is too many, picking 1 or 2 that you choose to try to implement in 6 months is also fantastic. So just awareness of the 13 controls and keeping them in the back of your mind. And I really like what Cassie said, building that idea of cybersecurity protection into your company culture will go a long way as well.
Yeah. And so if we're thinking of starting this, I mentioned before, right, my husband and I right now are operating 2 businesses. So if I want to start, is the best first step to take that baseline document that we've shared, and we'll put that in a follow-up email as well, and just go through and basically do a little bit of a self-audit, right? Where do we think we are right now? At what point do you think it's beneficial to engage with one of the practitioners, as Cassie said, to say, okay, I think we're on the right track? Like, can we do kind of a check-in to see at what point is it that we want to invest, I'm going to call it those external dollars for the certification process? Like, is there a lot of work, like, so that we can get better prepared to maybe alleviate some of those costs, right? Being mindful that, even $2,000 to $5,000 right now for a lot of businesses might be a bit of a stretch. How do we work best to kind of put ourselves in a good position and minimize potentially the costs to a company?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. I would say at the very beginning, you're right, taking a look at that publication on the 13 baseline controls, doing a bit of a self-audit, going through those e-learning materials that I had mentioned. We have one that is available right now, and then we have more that are coming out in the next few months or so. Going through those will help support your own self-audit. But if you feel like you want to speak to someone who is working with the program or to a certification body, there are a couple options if you're not quite ready to go jump into the audit right away. So the first would be to contact someone like me. We have CyberSecure Canada advisors all across Canada. I work in the BC and Yukon region, but we do have advisors available in others. So you can get in touch with me if you have particular questions. I can get in touch with some of the people that work on more technical related issues or matters with the program and get answers to you as well. There are also options to connect with a certification body a bit earlier on. I had mentioned that they have different services that they can offer in addition to the audit. So there are opportunities for them to perhaps do a quick meeting with an organization to run through some of those services and see if they can, or they will support or help out an organization as they go through those 13 steps.
Good. Okay. And then we have another question coming in, an example here about a real estate agent, right? Hacked, asked for ransom, lost access to email passwords. And again, how do you find where that breach happened, right? Especially, she's probably an independent contractor with an agency, but how do we determine that? But how do you, because we do have in our audience a lot of people that are coaches, consultants, contractors, so we're relying on that I'm going to call it the third party organization. So like Cassie said, a vendor, right, or a partner, you know, if they're not certified, how do we then protect ourselves as that solopreneur that's working with these partners constantly? Any tips on that?
I see. That's another really great question. And one that is a hard answer. But what I will say is that going back to that first control, that incident response plan, while I don't have some very detailed steps of how you could address that kind of situation off the top of my head,
Yep.
having that incident response plan is really going to help you be able to quickly respond to situations like this. So there are a lot of materials from the Cyber Center around what to include in your incident response plan. And those details will definitely help address matters,
Yep.
things like that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Perfect. I'm just going to scroll through here 1 second. So we've covered on that they can go, if they think they're already kind of ready, they can reach out to one of the partners, which is great. Let's see, another question here. Looking at, so if somebody wants to do this, right, they know it's important, they can invest, you know, the time to get this done, but they just don't have the funding. Are there any grants or programs available to help support the cost of becoming certified that you're aware of?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We, as a department, ISED, we're currently working with other of our internal colleagues to identify funding resources that will help businesses implement these 13 controls, because as Cassie had mentioned, there is an audit cost, but of course there's also a big implementation cost, and it's a lot of human resources that you're investing into this. It can be time consuming, and there is that IT cost that comes with it as well. So there are currently funding avenues that we're identifying, and we're hoping to have some more financial support available to businesses and organizations going forward. We don't have any particular to the BC region just at this time, but there have been some recently announced supports for organizations going through CyberSecure Canada and other regions. So CEDQ,
Fingers crossed.
there's fingers crossed, but there has been a precedent set, which is really, really good. The Federal Economic Development Region or Agency in Quebec had recently announced that it'll be providing funding in the amount of $820,000 to a variety of organizations going through the process. The same type of agency in the Atlantic provinces, ACOA, has launched some funding through their Digital Boost 2.0 program to help businesses improve their digital infrastructure, which will include some costs around CyberSecure Canada. So there's certainly a bit of a precedent being set, and we're hoping to see some funding available for organizations soon.
Perfect. I mean, if we get enough people lobbying for it, maybe that will happen, which is great. Now, what about, there's a question in the Q&A here. What if you're using primarily a third-party platform for an online store? So there's Squarespace, there's Shopify, things like that. Like, are they, you know, given that those are big organizations, do we assume that they've got this all covered and looked after, or should we inquire? And how does it impact you as that business owner that's using that service? If they're certified, does that mean you don't have to worry about it?
Great question. So the answer, I guess, in short to that, if you're using a third-party service provider such as Shopify, let's say, is that organizations are still responsible for their own cybersecurity and for protecting their own data. So liability regarding data breaches with third-party services are usually detailed in the terms of agreement. But if your organization still experiences a cyber attack, let's say, and even if the terms of agreement say, oh, it's okay perhaps Shopify will pay for it. I'm just kind of making a hypothetical situation here. Your organization is still going to encounter some reputational damage because its clients' data perhaps might have been accessed. So there's still a lot of challenges that organizations have to address, even if they're using third-party providers.
Yeah, because you can still, if gained access to your Shopify store, right, because of that breach, that like ultimately that comes back to you as well, right? So if you've got those controls in place, I think that would be, you know, just better protection for sure. So I'm just going to go back here. Many of us are very small businesses, nonprofits with no IT department or systems and with limited resources. Having first to learn about it in order to do the internal checks and gap analysis is overwhelming task that would involve choosing between our core activities and cybersecurity, right? So that's realistic, I think, for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So she's suggesting here, is there an initial service, right, for a bit of a free preliminary audit to identify gaps, right? So that they know, so if I'm going to invest some time, you know, what should I be focusing on? So I guess that kind of goes back to kind of that baseline and reviewing that information. Is there, do you know, or is there accessible, almost kind of like that self-assessment checklist where you can, you know, is there 2 or 3 questions that would say, okay, I've got number 2 of 13 done because I've ticked the boxes? Is that something we can find on the site, or would that be something that, again, you could reach out to one of the certification providers to look at that? Where does that kind of fall or come into place if it's available?
Absolutely. So one of the resources I haven't mentioned yet, and the exact name of it is slipping my mind, but there is an assessment available that is free, that is delivered by the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, I believe. So the way it works is you ask them to run this assessment on your organization. And it doesn't take very long. It's only about an hour or 2. And they'll be able to identify some of the control areas. So it uses the 13 baseline controls and applies those to your organization to see where your cybersecurity posture is at. So it'll come out with identifying some of the control areas that your organization might need to work on. That is something I can share the link with, perhaps with attendees after the webinar.
Yeah, if you can send that off to Netta, we'll include that in the follow-up for sure, along with all the links that we've already shared today. Perfect. So I'm mindful of time. We're a couple minutes over. I know we could probably talk about this for hours, and people would probably have, you know, more stories to share. But I do want to thank you both so much, Cassie and Lisa, for sharing the information, the stories, and Cassie kind of putting that real life spin on it, right? You went through it. So setting some of those expectations for people to know, you know, what you should be planning for. And again, the investment of time and some money in that preliminary work as well. So thank you both very, very much for sure. And mindful of our time, just quickly, I'll mention in the follow-up email that will come out from Netta, we've got a couple more sessions coming up. June 21st, how to write website content so your customers find you. And then on June 24th, we have another session on bidding and selling your services or products to the government. And don't think you're too small to do that. There's lots of opportunities out there. So I encourage you to register for both of those sessions. And again, they're always recorded and they'll be available on our website. And I think that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Oh yes, thank you, Netta. Quick little poll, 3 questions here if you don't mind answering those as well. And then we do have a quick follow-up survey after that, where again, you can share your ideas for topics, speakers, how we can help you as well. And if you enter that and complete that 2nd tier survey, you have the opportunity to enter a draw for a $50 gift certificate. So again, we've hopefully answered as many of your questions as possible. We will share Cassie and Lisa's information in the follow-up email, so you can reach out to them directly as well. And thank you both for your willingness to do that. So again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Cassie, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.